Good morning, everyone, and welcome listeners to another episode of the Closers Inner Circle podcast, hosted by your partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and together with my co-host, Ben Gay III, we are diving into the world of sales mastery with a gem from the Closers Part 2. Now, these books, Parts 1 and 2, are widely known as the sales Bibles. Truly, they are. So today we are back in the chapter. And another thing, I laugh every time I say that. And another thing, we journey to page 241, specifically to the segment titled Curing the Be Back Blues. We've all heard that. So I invite you to revisit our previous conversations, all 6 of them, to follow along as we delve into the narrative. Now, this chapter underscores the significance of perpetual learning and personal growth in the realm of top-tier salesmanship. And if you don't already have these books in your entrepreneurial library, Ben will share where you can buy them at the end of the show. And if you are new here, welcome. We're glad to have you. But let me summarize what the Closers Part 2 entails in bullet points. Ben highlights the significance of perpetual learning and development, and a pivotal takeaway from both the book and our podcast is that top-notch sales professionals are always in a state of growth and evolution. The book underscores the importance of continuous skill enhancement, reading, training, and experimentation with fresh ideas to remain at the pinnacle of the sales industry. Good morning, Ben. It's Wednesday, and here we are.
Good morning. A pleasure to be with you as always. And I know you don't have a Southern accent, but I love listening to whatever that is.
It's a drawl, darn it. That's what it is. Southern accents, I'm just going to point this out. Southern accents are regional. You tend to sound like
Yeah.
where you're from or what town you're from. I'm in Cajun country. There is no way in the world I sound like any of them, and they don't sound like each other. They really don't, because their family has an accent. Their little town has an accent.
Yeah, neighborhood by neighborhood.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I don't have an accent, y'all. I just don't.
We were in a restaurant yesterday, and next to us at a big round table were 10 people who obviously were together and had some sort of relationship. It turned out they all used to be in the container industry, boxes and stuff. And there was this very pretty lady who's probably had one or two, I forget what, adjustments made to her face, one or two too many. But she was gorgeous and was still stunning. And I'm not as good as I used to be because I'm not on the phone constantly anymore, but I used to be able to almost do neighborhoods and cities and states and so on after just a sentence or two. The two that I've never had good luck in separating are people, ladies especially, from Atlanta and Dallas. They sound exactly alike to me. And so this lady started talking, and I said, "Okay, you're from Atlanta or Dallas?" And she said, "That's amazing." I said,
Ben,
"Why?" And
where'd you go?
she said, "I'm from both."
Well, darn it.
Oh, have we lost each other?
Yeah, I'm going to have to cut that out. I was going to say in New Orleans, there are 2 very distinct accents in New Orleans.
Yep.
One sounds New York,
Yep.
and the other one is very Southern.
In New York, you can go borough by borough, and there are distinct differences. But Atlanta and Dallas, I've just never been able to sort out. And this lovely lady was from both, born in one and raised in the other. So I said, no wonder. But she thought it was amazing I could get either one. She said, and like you, she said, I don't have an accent. I said,
See?
really?
And she wasn't wrong. Never argue with a female from the
Oh,
South.
no,
Don't do
no.
it. If we say we don't have an accent, y'all, just take it at our word. Just keep on moving, move on.
Nothing to see here.
So we've been talking a lot about, and another thing, I love that title. I know I say that every time, but I love it. So let's pick up where we left off, because this is a big chapter. There's a lot going on with it, and we'll be talking about it, I think, for probably another 2 episodes or so. But this one specifically, we're talking about curing the be back blues. And when I first read that years ago, all I could think was, oh, well, let me ask my wife, because that's what you always hear. Let me ask my wife. Oh, geez, there they went. Bye.
My brother-in-law in Cleveland is an attorney,
Right.
and I will yeah.
I'm going to have to, I can't make a decision on my own, so I'm going to have to get permission from my mommy, my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law. Just say you're not interested. Come on now.
They taught us at Macy's when I was a young assistant buyer and then buyer there. Uh, refer it to a higher authority. In other words, if you don't want to make a decision now and the salesman's there with all his samples and all his or her samples, refer it to a higher authority. You have to check with. And they said, make sure that who you have to check with isn't in the next office. They're not available. And the one I always used was Ross Anderson. He was the vice president of Macy's in Atlanta. It was called Davison's, but Macy's in Atlanta. Nice guy, very sophisticated. If you were in the retail business, you knew of him, but his office was hidden away. You couldn't see him unless you caught him coming and going for lunch. So I always said, well, this type of decision I have to run by Ross Anderson. I never discussed any purchase with Ross Anderson. That wasn't what he was there for. If I couldn't do it, I'd have gotten fired for not being able to do it. But it was a trick just to get him off my back for a few minutes or a few days, or I was not brave enough to say there's not a chance I'm ever going to buy that. But you'll go broke with maybes and be backs and so on. I would much rather, if I've given a good presentation and they're semi-intelligent, I would much rather have a firm no than a be back or I got to think it over or a wishy-washy, anything else. Because then you start, how did the day go today? Oh, I've got 4 or 5. They're going to come through, and that's 4 or 5, which is Latin for zero.
Mm-hmm.
So learn how to get a definite answer. And part of that is setting it up right in the middle when we get to sales infiltration. Best thing I've ever written about selling, which is the last chapter in the Closers Part 2. I knock down a lot of those things by discussing up front before it's part of an argument or a threatening conversation or anything, just disclosing up front how I operate. And I won't go into that now, but the issue is knock it down to the point most people wouldn't say, I'll be back, or I want to think it over, because I already ruled that out up front. I refer to the brother-in-law who's a lawyer in Cleveland. That's one of the uh, things that we all agree to when we get down to the end. It's time to make a decision. I'm going to ask you if you want in or not. Just don't tell me that you got to check with your brother-in-law in Cleveland who's an attorney, because you don't have a brother-in-law in Cleveland and he's not an attorney
No.
if you have one of any kind, and you don't have to chat with him. So just
No.
tell me yes or no. And that pushes more yeses out, and the no's were going to be no's anyway. I'd rather know it now, not after I've wasted 3 days and hotel costs and dinners and everything when we all know what the answer is going to be. So let's hear it now.
Well, and that makes perfect sense. And this is just a thought that popped into my head, but if you are not a skilled salesperson or you really don't know how to close or haven't learned how to close, or you're trying to close the wrong darn thing, we see that a lot.
Mhm.
But the thing is, if you've got it in your head, you went back and you told your manager, oh, I've got 3 or 4, they're in the pipeline. Now you feel honor bound to just go nag the bejeebers out of somebody who already doesn't want your product or your service, and you're going to teach them to absolutely run when they see you coming or your name pops up on caller ID. They're going to hate you. Try to
Absolutely.
avoid that.
And not only are they saying no to the product or service you're selling now, they're saying no to any product or service you're selling in the future because it's you.
Exactly. And they're going to tell their friends.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
know
right.
this.
Yep.
Bad news travels a whole lot faster than good news.
and a whole lot more of it.
Mhm.
I don't know where these figures come up from. I have friends who used to make them up, and this may be a made up one, but it's pretty close to life the way it works. A happy customer will tell 3 or 4 people about you. An unhappy customer will tell 17 to 20 people about you. So you don't want any unhappy customers wandering around. The fact that they're not ready for your product or service today doesn't make them a bad person, and you don't want to make it where you become a bad person in their eyes. So give your best shot. And the other thing is learn how to get better. In the early days, I have an 86% closing rate now, but in the early days, it was, I don't know what it was. I wasn't bright enough to know what a closing ratio was, but I'm guessing it was 20%. And I would go to my sponsors in the business, Bill Dempsey among them, and I say, Bill, I'm not closing, and I'm not even sure I knew the word close yet, but I'm not having success in the business. He says, well, the product is good, the marketing plan's good, and I'm making whatever he was making at the time, 20,000 a month, 35, 40 years ago. So he was making almost a half a million a month then. He said, so it must not be the product, it must not be the pricing, it must not be the thing. Oh, it's you.
Let's laugh. Hello.
Yeah, you have to get better, and then you won't have all these aggravating little problems. And now I have 2 of the 14% I miss. It's a rolling average, but of the 14% I miss, half of them, 7%, to pick a number, 7% are really surprises to me because they should have gotten it. And maybe I can double back and so on. But the 86 and 14, that's after doubling back. That's net, 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 net. So 14% I legitimately miss. 7% of them, it was probably a condition. I didn't qualify them enough. They weren't qualified financially, geographically, religiously, whatever. They weren't qualified to buy it. And the other 7%, it was me. Somehow, as polished as most of my sales presentations are, no matter which client I'm working with or selling my own stuff or whatever, uh, I still didn't do it right for that person, or they would have said yes.
Well, yeah. It, but how many times did you double back? I gotta know.
It depends on there's no flat answer to that, but it depends. If I think there's still a shot and we have a miscommunication, I'll double back. If it's one of those where halfway through I realize they weren't going to buy for whatever reason, I go, all right, well, I respect your opinion and I want to remain your friend. Here's my business card. And I still hand out business cards. I go through thousands in a month where I do a big seminar, thousands a month. People say, oh, they're old fashioned. They may be, but I could live off the referrals I get from my business cards. And as you know, in every book that goes out of here, there is a business card on the front page, peel off the back, sticky business card, and there's a bookmark in every book, and the bookmark is a tall version of my business card. That's how come I haven't had to run an ad for the closers books in 35, 40 years. We have
Yeah.
having sold millions, each with a business card, each with a bookmark. Uh, the referrals are enough to put 4 kids through college.
And you sent me Waymish the other day because you and I have talked about your friend Ray Considine
Yep.
in public and in person. He was your very dear friend, and I know you still miss him to this day. And I still yell at my cats, Considine, just for the heck of it. It's fun. They kind of now they just raise their head and go, "What?" But for a while they were jumping like crazy. But I couldn't find it. I could not find Waymish. And for those of you who are saying, "What does that mean?" It's if you spell it out, why are you making it so hard for me to give you my money? It's a
Yep.
brilliant book. And I couldn't find it. And, I mentioned to you, I was looking for it. And next thing I know, here it comes, lands on my doorstep. First thing I did was open it. Denise, Ray would have loved you. It's signed and dated, and there's the business card.
Yep.
Every book of yours I have, that business card is in there.
Just want to be easy to find. Why you
Mhm.
make it hard for me to give you money? I want to make it very easy. Dial the 800 number, do, whatever, send me an email. As you say, you can throw a stick at the internet and hit one of us.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and that's the way you do it. Make it easy to get to you.
Well, and it does work. So let's go back. I'm now on page 242 because you are making it easy and you're easily accessible. You
So,
really are. You're far more accessible than I am, but I'm getting better about it slowly, very slowly. But when I got to page 242, because you were talking in the very beginning about a guy named Roland Madden,
mhm.
and you said he's one of those top sales pros that you frequently refer to. And then you go into the next little section, which is called zero in. So there's several things in this chapter. Zero in, Mr. Smooth. Is it really real? Let's go. And then sell from the audience. So let's start with zero in.
Okay, and let's give them a running start at that on the
Okay.
Be Back Blues. In that, what Roland was very good at, a little trick that he did. It's just sort of a cute thing. When he did all the things right, or he wouldn't have been one of the top people in the timeshare or vacation ownership industry. But even I missed 14% of mine. I don't know what his was, but probably something in that neck of the percentages. And so he was prepared for when it happened. And when they said they had to be back, or they'd like to, don't worry about us, we'll be back after
Right
he,
after lunch.
yeah, right after lunch, yeah, and the plane takes off. Uh, he would, he'd already knocked it down up front. He was a student of sales infiltration uh, as best he could. But then when they still, I don't care how good you are, or how clever you are, or whatever, some percentage will still throw you back a standard objection, like I was 23 years old and didn't know what I was doing. The objection still pops up after all these years. So what he would do, which was sort of cute, he would whip out his wallet and pick off the top bill, which was always $100 bill because it never left his wallet except for these opportunities. He never spent it. He'd say, okay, listen, and get out a blue marker's pen and say, just put your initials here on this $100 bill. And, why or what's going on? Well, you said you're going to be back, and hardly anybody ever is. But I want a reward. We've given you a free 2-day stay here. If you take advantage of our opportunity now, you're going to get this, and then you're going to get this and all. But uh, in addition to all that, I want to give you a personal gift. So you put your initials on this bill, and I'll keep it here in my wallet. And when you be back, just ask me to see the bill, and I'll pull it out and give it to you. That's your bill. And then people would say, well, what are all these other markings? Well, those are the other people that were going to be back. They never did, and you're not going to. So what I'd like to do is run through just some of the high points of the things that I must have missed, or we wouldn't be having this discussion.
Mm.
So he was, but my real point there is, one, he had a trick that was cute and very effective. So he used it and used it and used it. And then he'd go to the bank and turn it when there was no more room to write on an $100 bill. He'd go get another one or five or whatever. And from the bank, and they would always say, "What is this? What happens to your $100 bills?" And he'd tell them the story. Oh, and I noticed it. I haven't read that chapter in a while. Uh, Thing he told me: do not have them write on the serial number of the bill
Yeah, exactly.
because you've just voided the bill.
All right.
If you do, if the clerk is sharp, uh, they won't take it. You just wiped it out. But the trick was, here's $100 bill, and it's a polite way of saying, you're lying to me. You know you're lying, and it's important that you know that I know you're lying. So let's get serious. What is it really? And in general conversations over the years, did anybody ever come back and get the bill? He said occasionally, and it was usually the next day. They were still in town. They went out for dinner, they chatted about it. Oh, heck, let's do it.
And the
And then
wife needed a new hat.
in the way, and couldn't stand the thought of their $100 bill sitting in Roland's wallet.
There you have it.
Yeah. So, but he said it was always quick. Never had one come back 30 days later or a week later or whatever. It was later that day or the next morning. Short of that, the bill was going to get some more signatures before it got retired. And I said, what if they come back and the bill has been retired? He said, well, A, it's never happened. They never come back over that period of time. And B, if they did, I got other hundreds. You give me your word and I recognize you. Here's 100 just for coming back. And,
Oh, there you go.
but properly explain, you hear there's those timeshare companies, how to get out of your timeshare uh, business. They advertise on television, the radio, and direct mail and everything. Timeshare is a wonderful opportunity if it was sold to you properly, honestly, if you understood what you got, and if you use it. It's not a good deal if you sign up and never go to any of their properties or never swap out your week or whatever. But my friends who bought them uh, love my friends who bought them intelligently love them. They're forever going to Hawaii or here or there, and they're either going to their timeshare or a friend's timeshare or a week they swapped out or whatever, and they absolutely love them. I've got one friend who has like six or retired, so spends a lot of time on vacation, uh, who has, I think, 6 or 8 timeshares that she has paid for over the years and loves them, has no regrets. You and I have discussed one time, I think, the value of membership. If you're one of the bigger operations with resorts or locations all over the place, I would design a jacket that shows membership, like the green jacket at Augusta National for the Masters primarily is when you see it, that shows that you're a member of the timeshare uh, organization, so you're entitled to be on the property. And then I
Oh,
would have levels, senior member, this member, that member. The lady with the 6 or 8 timeshares should have a blazer that
platinum. She's
yeah,
platinum.
yeah, platinum level or something.
Mhm.
So she's treated specially and the guests understand the thing. When I was running Holiday Magic Cosmetics, we had a thing called instructor generals and trainer generals. The instructor generals were primarily men. I hate to make it sound like we were sexist, but we just didn't know any better perhaps. But they were primarily men and they primarily taught the business side of the business, and the recruiting and so on. The trainer generals, by and large, were women, and they taught the makeup side, how to sell the makeup, how to apply the makeup, and so on. But they all wore black, custom made. We had a tailor in San Francisco, did everything. All of our people went to them. It was called Allen House, long since out of business. But you went there and you got your skirt or your pants, and we had 2 pants for daytime houndstooth, for nighttime black, although you could do whatever you wanted, and the black top and the Holiday Magic Cosmetic seal, which looked very much like a Sheridan seal on the breast pocket. People, Denise, would kill to get one of those black suits. I mean, that was more important to them sometimes, it seemed, than the money they joined the business to make.
So
Uh,
status.
yeah, status, right? So when I go into a new business, if it's applicable, I'm looking around. Do you have uniforms? Even a polo shirt? Do you have, is everybody dressed in a polo shirt? A home improvement company in Atlanta that I do a lot of work with, they have, yes, they have polo shirts, and they come in 6 colors. And on Monday, everybody wears this one, and Tuesday, everybody wears this one, and so on. And from time to time, you'll see somebody in the wrong color. Isn't that big a deal? Their Monday shirt was in the laundry. But it creates a feeling of belonging to your customers. It makes you official versus some guy. I don't like to walk into a sales organization and try and figure out who's the employee and who's a fellow customer. So identify yourself. But that belonging thing is crucial, and it can be easily created. And I recommend that they do that. But Roland had jumped through all of those hoops and was among the top vacation ownership, they like to be called now, uh, people on the planet. And it was boiled down to just a few things. He sold a quality product. He was with one of the top organizations in the world. Quality product, well-known name. He dressed and looked the part. He had on the uniform. He started uniforms in his place. I told him about it, and he said, "Well, I don't think they'll do that." And I said, "Then you get one." So he went and got a jacket tailor-made and the pants and the whole thing. And he started wearing it. And he said by lunch, people said, "Well, where'd you get that?" "I'm in. How come I don't have one?"
I want
"Well,
one.
yeah, I want
If
one."
it's a good look and it makes sense and people can easily identify who you are,
Yep.
and should they be talking with you, it makes perfect sense. It's better than day of the week panties. Let's just leave it there. Remember those? I
Yes.
came across that not too long ago. And went, oh yeah, what the heck? So anyway, that's neither here nor there. It was just a random thought.
Want to go into zero in then on page where you
I
wanted to
do.
start?
I do because
242.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because you're talking about there were when a couple came back and they announced that they enjoyed the tour, they're very interested, but they'll be back. Let's pick up there.
Okay. If the $100 bill thing didn't work for you, here's the other thing. And a lot of the things that I write are based on nerve. People say, "How can you say that to a customer?" I said, "Well, A, I got permission up front. That's part of sales infiltration. I'll be straight with you. You be straight with me. We call it straight. That means you can ask me anything and I'll tell you the truth. And I assume I can ask you anything and you'll tell me the truth. Fair enough?" They'll
Mm,
always say yes to fair enough.
right.
What's to object to? Now you have permission to speak directly to them. And if if somebody has to think it over, which is similar to it's a cousin of be back, I have to think it over. The old way of doing it, and it still works. Uh, J. Douglas Edwards came up with it, and it's in uh, Sales Closing Power, the book I wrote for him after he passed away. But it was from my notes in the seminars and from his recording, so it's true. He could have written it if he'd bothered to get down to it, but people would say, "I've got to think it over," and I'll cut it short. Doug would say, "Well, what is it that you want to think over? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this?" And he knew pick a number, the 10 things that people want to think it over, understanding that what they're really doing is stalling, trying to get out of an awkward situation, because at the point of pulling the trigger to buy, people generally speaking get nervous unless it's a loaf of bread or something. But if it's a significant purchase, they get nervous. So zero in means you got to know what you're dealing with. Napoleon Hill, Dr. Hill, when we were working together, if he was in a board meeting or one of my mastermind meetings or something, and a question was thrown at him, we're launching this new product. What about this? What about this? He would always stop and say something to the effect of, "Tell me where we are now exactly." uh, which the answers to which could range from, "We're just thinking it over. We don't have anything." That's fine. It helped him know what we're dealing with. "And tell me what we're trying to accomplish exactly." So he set up sort of the bookends of how he could be of help, but he needed straight information. You can't, it's like arguing with a liar. They will always win, because they're more creative and they're not bound by decency, the rules of the game or anything else. So you need to flesh it out and zero in on what's the real problem. And then there's a cute thing in here. He says, I understand. You know, it reminds me of something my old baseball coach told our team years ago. He said not to get confused by all the rules and regulations. There are only three things really going on in a baseball game: you throw, you hit, you catch. That's it. And he said, in timeshare, you own it, you use it, you exchange it. Now, which of those do you really need to think over? And if they come up with a fourth one or a fifth one, fine, but you've got them talking about what's really bothering them. Because I got to think it over. There's no response to that other than fleshing it out. But I mean, there's no, oh, you want to think it over? Well, blah, 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 blah. Oh, that's it. I'll buy. Doesn't work that way.
No.
So flesh it out, find out what they're confused, and frequently is they're just confused. It's one of the reasons I like my favorite close is based on what you've told me or based on what we've been talking about. Here's what I recommend we do. Fair enough. They'll either say yes, no, or they'll say, well, what I'm really thinking about it flushes it out. It's hard to say no to fair enough, but it's pretty easy to say, well, here's what's really on my mind. And that's fine too. All I need to know, like Dr. Hill, is what are we dealing with? Where are we? What's the problem, if there is one? And what would it take to solve it for you? So that's the zero in part of that.
And some people, I'll be very frank with you, and you know me well enough to know that I'm not making this up. If I've said no once, I'll say it again, but it's just a politeness. There is no third.
Yeah,
When I've told you no, and I've given you my reasons, because, I can be fairly blunt, mostly because I don't want you wasting your time or mine. No, I'm just not interested, and here is why. But listen, thank you, and possibly I can refer you to somebody else. I'll try to get out of it kindly.
sure.
And most people are like, oh yeah, would you introduce me to sure, because I think you might have something to say over there, but I'm not your person. Okay, we understand. But if they push, they get a no. And that
The
second no is just me being marginally polite.
the to someone this morning, I wrote in response to something somebody sent me. Understand that quote no end of quote is a complete sentence.
It absolutely is.
And a lady I knew who was a counselor in one of the prisons I worked in, either San Quentin or Lompoc, had a big sign behind her desk so that you, the inmate who was asking for special favors or, something, uh, the answer to which almost 100% of the time was no. If it was going to be yes, everybody would have already known it. So you're trying to break the rules or get around this or that. What this big banner she had behind her said, "What part of no don't you understand?"
It's a
And
great
that,
question. No
yeah,
is no, for crying out loud. My mother said that was my very first word. I didn't say mama, daddy, doggy, cat. I didn't say anything but no. And she said I meant it. So there you have it.
yeah. And your job is to have them, you as a salesperson, your job is not to have them say no until we're out of all other options. In other
Right,
words,
right.
keep the ball in play. But there comes a time when no is no for whatever reason. It's a condition. They don't have the money. They don't need the product. They don't like you.
There you have it.
And
And if you nag at them, it's going to go very quickly from they don't have the money to they can't stand you.
yeah, absolutely. And people, I've coined the term years ago. People like to do business with and or buy from people they know, like, trust, and with whom they feel safe. And I've heard many times people say, "Oh, yeah, but you've been selling for 50 plus years and so on, so you've had time to build these things up." And I said, "No, uh, I establish that relationship with people I've never met, who don't know I've been in selling for many years, who don't know my background or anything else about me, because I know for a fact, work with this folks when you're calling on people, that they make up their minds about you, so the sale is either made, lost, or heavily influenced in the first 10, 15, 20 seconds,
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
based on their computer-like brain looking at
Yeah.
you.
Lizard
And
brain.
yeah,
That's what
and
I call it.
funny you mentioned lizard brain. I woke up this morning with a gift from one of our cats right
Uh-oh.
outside our bedroom door. A lizard who
It
was not,
wasn't
he
still
was
living,
not
was it?
totally dead. He was the type
Oh.
you pick up carefully and take to the garbage,
Oh, poor
because I
baby.
think he had another bite or two left in him. And the
Mm,
cat's sitting there like, hey, hey, how about that, huh?
yeah. How you love me now. I pick up lizards all the time. I pick them up by the tail, and I forget frequently that I can snap their tails off
Yep.
if I'm not careful.
Yeah.
And I had one lizard that, I mean, I recognized him because he had the broken tail. It didn't grow back. And I would see him on the front porch, and I'm pretty sure he would give me the beady eye, like, look what you did to me. He was mad. But he was around for a
Lizards
couple,
are
three
known,
years.
lizards carry a grudge.
They
I've
do.
found that about them.
They really do. Mice, not so much. They're like, ah, gosh, but lizards, like, I will be back.
And the new thing, it must be bat season. We are now getting occasional bird, but they do that. But I think with the mice or the rats, they found where they come from, and I believe they just sit outside the hole and wait for them to come forth. Birds you got to
Yeah.
catch not paying attention. So I'm not sure how good a hunter they are versus a patient waiter. But all of a sudden, in the last month or so, we've gotten 3 or 4 bats
Oh,
that they've gotten from somewhere, and they were
oh,
all,
I love bats.
yeah. Well, I'm not sure I love them, but
Look at their
the
little faces.
that's true. They
They're
look
so
like
cute.
they're mice with wings, or as New
Yeah.
Yorkers say, pigeons or rats with
Yep.
wings.
Exactly.
All right,
It's
you want to do
funny.
Mr. Smooth?
Yeah, I do because and at the very end of this page, 243, and I hope we're going to have time for this. I really want to get to the point where it says the meeting ends. And then there's a lesson. There's a lot of significance to this question that was asked. So start at the beginning and I'll chime in when I need to.
Okay, please do with that one. The time comes. Mr. Smooth is sort of based on sales infiltration. The last chapter in the Closers Part 2, I repeat, the best thing I've ever written, and I think the best thing I've ever written, that anyone's ever written about selling. It tells you what a master closer is, does, and how to be one. And as Cary Grant, the old actor, said, uh, the secret of acting was not to get caught at it. That's also the secret of selling. Don't get caught at it. And that's the difference between the Closers Part 1 and the Closers Part 2. The Closers Part 1 is the red raw meat of selling, the kicks, the blocks, the punches, the things that are really going on, whether you like it or not, inside the head of the salesperson and the potential customer or customer, as the case may be. The Closers Part 2 shows you what sophisticated people really do with that red, raw information. And Mr. Smooth is a great example of this. Rather than leave it hanging, I will tell you that it was Cheryl Shoemate, a dear friend of mine, has worked for me off and on since the early 60s in Holiday Magic Cosmetics, just died a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, I'm so
Uh,
sorry.
yeah, it was one of those, you're sorry when anybody dies, but
Yeah.
Cheryl was such a part of my life for so many years. It was like, I know what people mean when they say I have a hole in my heart. For a week or so, I felt like part of me was missing. But Cheryl walked into the office one day, and I was talking to, I'll sort of give it away, but I was talking to a salesperson who was making a call on me about something. Cheryl walked in as he was that type of friend. He didn't have to knock or ask or anything. He just walked in, picked up a magazine, flopped down on the sofa, and acted like he was reading. But I know Cheryl well. He was listening to what was going on. And near the end, or at the end, when Cheryl and I were talking after the sales presentation was over, I don't remember if I bought or didn't buy or told him I had to think it over or whatever. But Cheryl said he lived on the East Coast and was out here in California visiting and working 4 or 5 times a year. And everybody knew he was part of the team, so he was all over the building, in and out of people's offices, and they all knew him, and vice versa. He knew most of them. So when the meeting with the salesperson was over, Cheryl, I'm paraphrasing, but Cheryl said, uh, who was that? I don't feel like I've ever met him. And I thought I knew everybody in this building. And the point was, he had missed the fact that this was a salesman, an outsider, calling on me, trying to sell me something. This guy was so good that Cheryl thought he was an employee and that he and I were working on some problem we had, looking for a mutual uh, solution. And when I told him that he wasn't, he was a salesperson, he said, no, I'm talking about the guy that was talking about the whatever. And I said, yeah. He said, no, well, this guy was one of your team. And I said, he must have really been good if he left you that impression, Cheryl. He was a person calling on us for the first time ever. And Cheryl almost couldn't believe it. And from time to time over the years, he would say, do you remember that guy that I thought was an employee or a team member or something? And I'd say, yeah, because by then we knew the story well. And he'd say, God, he was good. And so that's Mr. Smooth is a goal. When I call on someone or begin working with someone, I rather quickly are talking about we and us and so on. I discard the outsider trying to sell you something, or even the outsider trying to do good for you, which is the same thing if you're in the right place. But I get that put aside rather quickly. It's we. When we're doing this, or what do we think about when this happens to us, or whatever, so that the defensive guards begin to come down rather quickly. And I've frequently think about Mr. Smooth when I am working with somebody, especially in the early stages. I'm thinking to myself, come across like you're a team member, not a dreaded, disgusting, dishonest salesperson, which is sort of where you start out
Yeah,
in
people don't
any
like
selling.
to. Yeah,
Yeah.
when we're called salespeople, and I've been called that all my life, and I used to get bent out of shape. Now I understand that it's just part of how we help people.
And
But for
it's
the
exactly, and it's the first thing on my business card.
right,
Trainer, author, and all comes later. It's Bengay the Third, salesman. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm proud of it because of the way I practice it. There are other people who call themselves salesman, saleswoman, salesperson who are embarrassing to me. I think, oh God, they're creating the image that 10 years from now is going to make it harder for me to make a sale because they're thinking of that person when they're thinking about it. And that's one of the things I frequently, depending on how I feel a relationship is developing, I'll say early in the presentation, hi, I'm Ben Gay. I'm that dreaded salesman that you think is a liar, cheat, and thief. I'm not, but I understand it if you feel that way. And you are the dreaded prospect who's going to tell me, I want to think it over. I got to check with and I know you wouldn't do that
I
to
have to
me.
talk to my wife.
Yeah,
She'll kill me if I buy anything that's not a head of lettuce. I can't do it.
yeah, that's the extent of my authority as a head of lettuce. I'm forever. I like to kid around with people, and if I see a couple in the grocery store and Gigi and I are going up and down the aisles, I'll say to her, is he allowed to make any decisions at all? And the ladies get it. And so do the men generally. If the man responds first, he'll say, no, only minor decisions. And the lady
Any,
was
anytime
absolutely,
I see a man wandering around Home Depot, because I like Home Depot, I like to
yeah,
go and
yeah,
look at things and, play around with my house. And I'll see a man wandering around and I'll ask him, do you have a note from your wife? And he'll just crack up. It's like, no, I don't.
yeah,
And if he's anywhere near the paint counter, I'll warn him, you better call your wife and
yeah.
get her over
Don't be
here.
making any color
Yeah. Do
decisions.
not bring that home with you. It's going to cause trouble.
The I'll say to ladies sometimes, it's none of my business. You just pass him in the eye. It's none of my business. But he just put something in the cart that I don't think you saw or approved.
Like a kid with the candy. Like, Mama, put it back.
And Gigi will frequently say something like, "Ignore him. He's crazy." That
Yeah,
doesn't
but you're
change the
right.
fact he slipped something in the cart.
That's right. You're just reporting. You're doing the right thing.
I'm just sharing
Yeah,
information.
that's exactly right. But going back to, because we are going to run out of time pretty
Yeah.
quickly, and I hate that we do this every week. But in page 243, you say if you caught the real significance of that simple question, talking about, what Cheryl said, who is that guy? I mean, he didn't understand that this was an outside salesperson. So then at the end of this chapter, you say, and that's your ultimate test in this type of selling. Get so good that an independent observer like your friend Cheryl, even a skilled salesperson, could watch your work and not be sure whether you were the customer or the salesperson until after the deal is closed. So my question after that is, did you do business with this gentleman, Mr. Smooth?
I really don't recall, but
Oh,
probably, and I say probably because if he was selling a product or service that I needed or wanted at a reasonable price, probably so. But the issue quickly went over the years as we've told the story, it quickly went from what he was selling to how he was selling. So unless I just didn't need it at all or want it in our business, and I think the way Cheryl told the story, uh, I spent enough time with him where I'm sure we did something with him. And again, I have a hard time differentiating in his case with did we do it or not, or were we going to do it anyway? In other words, he integrated himself, infiltrated into our organization so well that I don't recall. Like I don't recall what my secretary executive assistant used to tell me to do on a day-to-day basis. She had infiltrated my family and the business. And she ran, her name was Martha Conley, but she went by Marty. Marty Conley was billed as my secretary. She was the boss of the company. She decided, first of all, she controlled who I saw and therefore what I saw. So that makes her
she liked
sort
this guy.
yeah, really puts you in a power position.
Right.
And then if Marcia, my wife at the time, she since passed away, was out of town or something, Marty took over the family. When I came downstairs in the morning for coffee, Marty was already in the kitchen. She'd change young Ben's diapers and was in charge of everything. Marty would have made a great salesperson. But fortunately, I've probably told you this, but one day I was talking to one of my people, Vance Powell, vice president of the Southwest or something, and he asked me to do something. I said, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea, Vance. I'll approve it and we'll do it." And he said, "Okay, well, put me through to Marty." And I said, "What?" I just said, "We'll do it." He said, "Ben, I really want this done.
I want
Please put
Marty.
me through to Marty." I'm not taking a survey. I want it
I
to
don't care if
happen.
you think you're the boss. You're not.
But that
I,
was, I've never thought of it that way, but she was the ultimate infiltrator. Bill
yeah.
Patrick, the chairman of the board of the company and the owner, I'd hear him right outside my door frequently asking Marty if he could do this or do that or something. I'm thinking, you own the company.
Yeah, but you got that general, and she's right there.
That's right.
I wanted to ask you, and I know we're going to have to move on and talk about what we'll be talking about next week, but here's my real question after listening to you talk about Mr. Smooth. Why didn't you nab him? Why didn't he come work for you?
Well, I don't recall. I'm not going to make up an answer to your question because I really don't recall. But Carlos Fong, who was the head waiter at a restaurant we went frequented called The Dock in Tiburon, California, wound up being president of the Mexican operation, of our Mexican operation. And the reason that came to mind is you saying, why didn't you nab him? I was forever nabbing good people.
I know you were.
Yeah, if you getting the top automobile salesperson at the local Toyota, however you pronounce it, dealership, waited on us one night at one of our favorite casual restaurants on Main Street in Placerville. And the conversation started out just like it did with Carlos Fong 40 years ago. How much do you make doing this? You're really good at what you do. And she told me, what if I could tell you I knew a way to make 5, 10 times that amount with less effort? Well, I'd be interested. 30 days later, she was selling cars. 30 days after that same exchange with Carlos Fong, he was one of our top distributors. And 30 days after that, he was the president of our Mexican operation. So I'm forever looking for him wherever I can spot him. And I just don't recall. I don't think he did, or I would really know.
He
I can't even
did,
think of his
yeah.
name now. So
Yeah, he did. And I wonder why. I was telling you about my weird, I don't know, 16, 17 years old memory while I was washing my hair this morning. Where did that even come from? But all of a sudden now I know why I don't wear my hair down or let it touch my face. So it's like, oh yeah, ick. I remembered it. I bet it'll come to you when you're out wandering around and you go, oh, Denise wanted to know. So call me. Call
yeah,
me when you figure it out.
many of the things I wonder about come to me at about 3 o'clock in the morning. I
Oh
sit
yeah.
straight up in bed, and Carlos Fong, and she goes, what? Where'd that come from? Well, I've been trying to think of his name all day long, and it just came to me. And then she'll say, write it on your pad.
Yeah, don't yell.
Don't yell, just turn over quietly. You have a little pad with a pen, write it there.
Yeah, she's got to work on your training. Well, listen, let's pick up next week. We'll be on page 244 again. Is it really real? And then we'll go on to let go and then sell from the audience, which is a fascinating conversation in this book. And if we can, then we'll get to straight. And then, this is a long chapter, so we're going to be in it for a while. But Ben, tell people where they can find you, where they can buy your books, and where they can find information about your mentorship.
If you're interested in mentoring, being mentored and worked with, as Dr. Hill was kind enough to do for me, I try and do to others now what he did for me many years ago. Just send me an email with a subject line, personal mentoring. And if you do that, I will send back by email an explanation of how the program works. We won't call you, we won't harass you, we won't do follow up. So I'll send it to you. If you like it, you get back in contact. And my email is B as in Ben, F as in Frank, G as in gay, the numeral 3, BFG3 at DirectCon, short for Direct Connect. DirectCon as in November .net. Just say personal mentoring. And we'll send out the information, no cost, no obligation, no follow up. And which kills me, but I don't like to be bugged about things like that, so I don't do it to other people. And then if you're interested in getting involved in the Closers series, and it's a whole series, Closers parts 1, 2, 3 are done. Part 4 is being written by a lady we all know, Denise Griffitts, and it's
With
about
no
selling
Southern accent.
using podcasting and having your own podcast, perhaps, etc. And then the Closers part 5 is in print and available at this site. Go to stores, STORES ebay.com /. all one word, Ronzoni Books, RONZONEBOOKS. And they will send you the books that you order, books, whatever, signed by me and dated, and at a lower price than we sell them ourselves. So that's good for you. And free shipping, which we meaning the royal we, me, don't do either. So if I was going to buy the Closers, I would go to their website instead of mine. And everything comes with an unconditional lifetime, no questions asked, money back guarantee. But if you return a book, of course, we will hunt you down and kill you.
Okay, I'm keeping my books. Just so you know.
Yeah.
I'm
Listen up,
scared.
Denise.
I'm scared. So anyway, and let me tell the audience too, because we missed this part last week, I think, but we love to hear from you. So if you have questions about the Closers, about anything, sales, podcasting, anything that you want to ask us within reason, obviously, just get in touch with us. We will do our level best to answer those questions on the air. So don't ignore us. Please, we're here to help you. And I'm easy to find online, and you're welcome to contact me directly, toll free at 1-888-719-6711. Again, 888-719-6711. Leave a message and I will return your call just as soon as I can, and you will hear directly from me. It'll be me, saying, hey, this is Denise, how can I help you? You can also email me at support@yourofficeontheweb.com. And honestly, we would love to hear from you. So Ben will pick up next week, and let's all go forth and have a terrific day. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and be sure to find us on your Partner in Success Radio. Again, just look for our names or the Closers Inner Circle podcast, and we've given you our direct contact information. Truly, you can't throw a stick on the internet without hitting us. So go for it. We'd love to hear from you. Ben, I will see you next week.
Looking forward to it.
Me too.